Hello, dear viewers. Support me by subscribing to my channel and share my video if you like it. And also, make sure you comment your thought. Now let's start the video. Bella made a triumphant sound in the back of her throat when the shirt she had been struggling with for the better part of 2 minutes finally slipped over her head. She stumbled backwards when she was greeted with the widely smiling face of her great-grandmother, Marie, or as Bella called her in the name she was widely known by, so much that most people forgot her real name, Nan. "Jesus, Nan, don't do that," she yelped. Nan cackled and moved over to sit on Bella's unmade bed. Bella hastily shoved her arms through the long sleeves and ran her fingers through her hair, gathering it at her neck and pulling the rest from where it was trapped beneath the fabric at her back. She released it once it was free, and it fell to mid-back in loose mahogany waves. "Where have you been, anyways?" Bella asked. "I haven't seen you since the car ride here 2 days ago." "I've been around, checking out the surroundings, getting a feel for the place." Nan glanced around what would serve as Bella's room for the next year and a half. "I see your father still doesn't know you very well," she remarked, staring pointedly at the lavender walls. "Hey, in his defense, I haven't exactly been here since I was a kid." A skeptical look crossed Nan's face. "Uh-huh? And did you even like this color then?" Bella busied herself with sticking her recently purchased school supplies in her worn bag. A ratty bag Nan had been trying to convince her to get rid of for years. "That thing is falling apart at the seams," Chi-Man, she'd say at least once a week. "That's what I thought," Nan replied smugly. She eyed Bella's bag as she closed the flap. "Don't you think Stash is jumping the gun a bit by having you start school immediately? You just got here. Doesn't he think you need a little time to adjust?" Bella grimaced. "You do know that I hate that nickname for him. She really should be used to it." Nan referred to everyone by a nickname. Bella strongly suspected it was so she didn't have to remember their actual names. Nan waved her hand through the air dismissively. "It's the perfect nickname for him. He's had a mustache since the day your mother first introduced him to the family over 20 years ago. I'm almost certain he was born with it. Well, Charlie," she stressed his name, "did offer me time to settle in. I'm the one who told him I was ready. The new term started last week, and if I put it off, I'm gonna fall behind. Besides, I've had the weekend to adjust." "You do know it's strange that you call your father by his first name?" Bella shrugged uncomfortably. She did know it was strange, but it felt odd to call him Dad. Weird, even. Her parents had divorced when she was a year old, and her mother had packed her up and moved back to Phoenix to live with Nan, who, still feeling the loneliness from the death of her husband 2 years prior, had happily offered the granddaughter she'd practically raised and her great-granddaughter the 2 spare rooms in her sprawling colonial, and they would live in that house for the next 13 years. Although Renee could have just as easily moved in with her own mother, Sandra, who lived an hour and a half outside of Phoenix, there was an animosity between the two that had not been settled, despite the distance, and would sadly remain that way up until her death 3 years ago. Bella had only seen Charlie sporadically after that, usually for the occasional weekend and a month or so during the summertime. But the visits had dropped to a mere weeks as she got older, whittling down until she eventually realized she hadn't seen her father in almost a year. Because of that, she supposed they both could be blamed for the distance. It's not like the road didn't go both ways. He seemed to understand her reluctance to call him Dad as she got older, or any incarnation of the name, and grudgingly accepted it. That was probably because Bella referred to her mother the same way. She felt Nan lightly touch her shoulder. "I'm sorry, Chame. After 80 years, you'd think I knew enough to stop letting my mouth get away from me." Bella smiled. "It's all right, Nan." She thought about all the times when Nan had dressed someone down. Mean kids, parents, teachers, snobby neighbors, all had gotten a taste of her sass. Renee had often told Bella that it was where she got it from. "It's always been one of my favorite things about you." "Likewise, Chame." She looked over her shoulder at Bella's alarm clock. "You better get going. You don't want to be late for school," she said, mere seconds before Charlie knocked on her door. "You ready yet, kiddo?" came awkwardly from the other side. "School starts in an hour." Bella opened the door as Nan pulled a face. "Kiddo?" "Good grief." "Shut up," Bella muttered absently before cringing at the look on Charlie's face. "Not you, I'll be down in a second." Charlie nodded, but the slightly put-out look remained. "Hey, I know you have the truck, but I could drive you, if you want, so you don't get lost." "Thanks, but I'm not sure you can get lost in Forks." Did that come out as sarcastic as she thought it did? Besides, We passed the school on the way here, so she trailed off, combating with the slight guilt she felt for refusing his offer. But she really didn't want to show up for her first day at school in a police cruiser. Okay, I'll meet you downstairs then. Did you want some breakfast? I think I might have some cereal. I'm good. I saw some apples in the kitchen, so I'll just grab one of those before I leave. Charlie nodded again, looking officially uncomfortable by now and almost desperate for an excuse to leave, but he hesitated. Hey, I thought I heard you talking to someone as I was coming up the stairs. He cut off, his sharp eyes moved from Bella to suspiciously scan the otherwise empty room. I was talking to myself, Bella hurriedly supplied, feeling an artificial and no doubt Joker-like smile. Stretching her lips, she spotted Nan out of the corner of her eye mouthing too much, and eased it up a little. Yeah, I do it all the time. Drove Renee nuts. He tried his best to hide it, but she got the sense that Charlie was starting to second-guess his decision to let his crazy daughter come live with him. Now it was Bella's turn to be desperate. Well, I'm just gonna grab my things. Yeah, okay, sure. Good to have you here, kiddo. He added as an afterthought before descending the stairs. Bella leaned her head against the door frame and fixed a mildly exasperated look on an apologetic Nan. It was best to let Charlie think she was a little odd. After all, how exactly could you explain that you're talking to your great-grandmother? The same great-grandmother that's been dead for almost 7 years. Taking a big bite of her apple, Bella slammed the truck door shut, absently thanking Charlie for providing her with her own transportation. Even if the vehicle he had gotten for a good deal was a bucket of bolts. Like she had told herself earlier, anything was better than having to be hauled around in a police cruiser while she was here. Or worse, being chaperoned by Charlie in his own Jeep. She felt the slightest shift in the air and was surprised to see Nain appear in the passenger seat. You were coming? I've seen you off to every first day of school since you were a little girl. Why stop now? Yeah, but you usually don't actually come with me. Niren's face fell. I won't come with you if you don't want me to, Chime. She sighed. I imagine my being there would only be a distraction anyways. I never think you're a distraction, Nan. And she didn't. Bella had grown so comfortable with Nan's presence over the years that it was almost strange not to have her there. I think it'd be nice to have the company. Know that at least one person is on my side. She grinned. Plus, I'd never pass up on the chance to miss out on all the fun commentary on my new schoolmates. She turned the key in the ignition and shifted it into gear when the engine fired up. As she pulled out of the driveway, she listened with half an ear as Nan began prattling on about the passing scenery, her mind rolling over what her first day would be like. She wondered how long it would take before she was labeled as the weird girl. It was a title she was familiar with at her old school. It was also a word that had stopped bothering her a long time ago. When you spoke with your dead great-grandmother, you could either accept it and the titles that would eventually come with it. There was only many times you could mumble to yourself and seemingly laugh at nothing. Or you could curl up in a corner gibbering and drooling all over yourself. It really wasn't a hard choice. As strange as it sounded, it was never really something that scared or bothered her. She had been more scared at Nan's funeral, uncertain of what she was going to do without her best friend and confidant. She had curled up into the corner then. Afterwards, at Nan's house, which, according to the will, was now Renee's house, where the funeral goers had gathered, she had ignored the unfamiliar relatives. Why is it that some family members only made the effort to gather at funerals instead of actually visiting while the person was alive, and their awkward consolations, and retreated to Nan's room instead? Clutching a pillow laced with her soft floral perfume, she had sobbed for what felt like hours, only stopping when she had heard the soft whisper of the nickname that only Nan had called her. Seconds later, she'd felt the soothing touch of a soft hand drying her tears and had looked up into warm, familiar hazel eyes. That was when she had known everything would be okay. Bella still hadn't figured out exactly why she could see Nan, and only Nan. If it truly was an extrasensory gift, then it only applied to her, something she was extremely grateful for, even more so when her mother moved them into a house across the road from a graveyard. She had asked her once, but Nan appeared to be as uninformed as her. Either that, or she was deliberately being vague in a I can't share the secrets of the universe kind of way. All she had said was that she was there to look out for her. Consider me your own personal guardian angel, she had said with a smile. Nan had definitely proved how true that was 3 years later. Bella had woken to Nan shaking her shoulder and urgently telling her that she needed to get out of the house. Blinking sleepily, Bella had listened to the darkened silence, not hearing anything particularly worrisome. Her mother had been out for the night at some party again, and a now 14-year-old Bella had gotten very used to being alone at night. Well, semi-alone, she supposed. She had gotten the message, though, when Nain had barked, "Leave now!" leaping out of her bed and tearing out of her room, down the stairs and out the door, not even pausing to put on a sweater or shoes. Further, Nan had ordered when Bella had stopped at the sidewalk in front of her yard. Terrified at this point, she had continued running, passing by her nearest neighbor's house, who was roughly 500 feet away, before a loud explosion sounded at her back, followed by a wave of intense heat. She had halted to a stop and turned to witness her house literally engulfed in flames so bright they lit up the night sky. When Renee had returned an hour later, obviously having ignored the 10 missed calls on her cell phone, Bella had learned a long time ago that "call me if there's an emergency" really meant call me if you have no problem with the phone ringing 20 times before it goes to voicemail. The firemen were finally getting the fire under control. She had began hysterically screaming Bella's name, her eyes finally landing on a blanket-wrapped bundle next to a mystified and slightly singed fireman. Crushing her to her, Renee had shown her daughter more affection in that moment than she had in the 14 years previous, showering her face in sloppy wet kisses. "You're all right?" she kept repeating, in between harsh sobs. Bella had remained silent and unresponsive in her arms. "I don't know how she did it," a hoarse voice spoke from the side. Renee turned to the fireman. "How she did what?" Got out. The neighbors said the house exploded. That place would have been gutted in minutes. Hell, seconds. If there even was smoke to warn her. The tone of his voice made it obvious that he knew it was unlikely. "The girl here said she didn't hear a detector go off. So how he shook his head. Renee flushed in embarrassment. She had gotten tired of the smoke detector going off whenever she had cooked and had taken the batteries out ages ago. "How did you get out, dear?" Bella's solemn chocolate eyes had met hers, and whispered one word, "Nan." Needless to say, that would be the first and only time she ever mentioned Nain to anyone else. There was only so many times the word hysterical could come up, not to mention that lovely trip to a psychologist who had sternly asked if her mother was abusing her in any way, before anyone would realize that it's easier just to keep silent and to agree with her mother that yes, she had been more terrified that night than she appeared, and yes, she had been lamenting the loss of her beloved great-grandmother's house more than anything else. The questions had stopped after that. She was thankful that Nan seemed to be able to hear her talk even when her mouth wasn't moving. This didn't mean she could hear all her thoughts, simply the ones that were directed at her, just like a normal conversation. She stuck to strictly communicating like that for the most part, only talking out loud when she was certain no one was near. It had been something she exercised the night of the fire, as the fireman sat next to her, offering her comforting words in between confused and slightly uncomfortable glances. It probably didn't help that Bella's wide-eyed gaze was fixated at some point over his shoulder, where Nan hovered the entire time. "Are you psychic too?" Bella had asked, a strange mix of solemnity and giddiness coloring her words. She had been thrilled when she had witnessed Nan alternately drift, though objects, and touch them as if she was still solid. "No," Chimeke. A contemplative look stole over her face as she considered her next words. "Do you remember when you were younger and you told me that something just wasn't right about certain people?" When Bella was 10, there had been a couple, the Steiners, that her mom had been casual friends with. They had a little girl named Ava who was a year younger than her. Her mom had considered them affluential, or posh as she used to say, and done whatever she could to nurture her relationship with them. That included trying to set up numerous play dates and sleepovers. Bella had went once, but refused to go after her mother had introduced her to Mr. Steiner one day at the supermarket. She wouldn't tell her mother why, but had told Nan that he didn't feel right. It was the talk of the town the next day, when a barrage of police cars were in front of the Steiner house. Mr. Steiner was being led out in handcuffs, with Mrs. Steiner trailing behind him, screaming, "He's never done anything like this before." A stoic Ava was being led to a car by a kind-looking older woman. Nan had met her after school that day, pulling her into a fierce hug and whispering in her ear that she should always trust her feelings. "You mean something didn't feel right?" "Yes, Chima, I didn't know exactly what, but it was a feeling like something bad was around the corner." A solemn Nan looked at the smoking pile of rubble that had served as her home for the last 40 years. "Real bad. How are you feeling, Chime?" Nan asked as Bella pulled into the Forks High parking lot and maneuvered her way into an empty space. As good as a girl can be starting a new school midway through the year. She cut the ignition and eyed the passing teens, a few who returned it with curiosity. She imagined in a small town like this, a new face would stick out. No doubt word had gotten around that Chief Swan's daughter was in town. Joy. Nan flashed her an encouraging grin. Keep your chin up. Bella nodded, took a deep breath, opened the door and grabbed her bag off the seat beside her. She cringed when the door squealed loudly, not unlike the sound a dying rabbit made. Any of the students who hadn't paid her the slightest bit of attention before were now staring and whispering amongst themselves. Gotta make an impression, right? She thought wryly to Nan, who was eyeing the body of the truck. What was Stash thinking when he got you this? Hey, it's not so bad. She slung the bag over shoulder and patted the rusted red paint. Wasn't it you that said age comes with beauty? I was referring to myself, Chame. Wasn't that the truth, though? Even woman 40 years younger had been jealous of Nan's looks. She had always had a youthful beauty about her, even now. Technically, in death, she still looked beautiful. She was a head taller than Bella, her body long and lithe, her back straight, and her gait confident. The touch of arthritis that had just started to stoop her back and slow her walk a few years before her death was long gone. Long, shimmery silver-white hair fell pin-straight to her waist, part of it pinned back by the golden sun-shaped barrette that had been a staple in her hair since her beloved husband, Will, gave it to her for a wedding anniversary gift 10 years before his death. Though Bella had never met him, Nan had told her that his pet name for her had been My Sunshine. Always a fan of bright colors and breezy fabrics, she had been thrilled to realize that she had the ability to change her clothes at her leisure using nothing more than a thought. It had been a concept that admittedly baffled her and relieved Bella. It would have been a bit unsettling to see her in the same clothes every day. She felt like it would have really driven home the fact that she was dead. At least this way, she could pretend for a bit. Today she wore a loose, billowy, long-sleeved dress in a blue similar to a clear summer sky. A hemp belt was tied at her waist and gladiator sandals were on her feet. Silly little things like the temperature didn't stop her. Bella knew she didn't feel it anyways. And it wasn't just her looks that made her beautiful, but her personality as well. She was always quick to smile, or laugh, or joke. The soft laugh lines around her mouth and eyes was evidence to that, and if you didn't feel like laughing, she could wipe away your tears, give you a shoulder to cry on, or lend an ear. There was no question that she could be the sweetest person ever, but give her attitude and she never failed to give it back, usually finding some way to embarrass you in the process. That had always been Bella's favorite part. Looking at her discreetly, Bella grinned. She truly was her best friend, and she had always felt proud at the fact that she shared this woman's name. Drawing her confidence from that, she passed through the throng of students gathered at the entrance, raising a defiant eyebrow at the ones brave enough to make eye contact. Entering, Bella cut to the left and headed towards the door with a little office sign on the wall beside it. Clearing her throat, she attracted the attention of the gray-haired woman behind the desk. Miss Cope, according to the plaque on her desk. Can I help you? Yes, I'm Bella Swan. It's my first day. Oh yes, Chief Swan's daughter. Welcome to Forks High. She opened up a desk drawer and began digging through its contents. Pulling out a few papers, she beckoned Bella closer. Chief Swan already filled out most of the necessary paperwork, but he forgot about the medical information. So if you could just have him fill that out and return it later. She slid the paper over to Bella, who immediately folded it and tucked it in her bag. This here's your locker number and combination. It's right next to your homeroom. You are so lucky to have Miss Dale. All the kids rave about her. She'll be your English teacher as well. Bella took that sheet as well. Also, we got your class choices, but we had to make a small change to your schedule. The chemistry course you were interested in was full, so we had to substitute it for biology. Is that all right? If not, history is available as well. Biology is fine. Bella had only chosen a science course to round out her subjects anyways. Miss Cope smiled. Wonderful. That's everything then. Would you like someone to show you around? Bella glanced down at the schedule in her hand, which she noticed conveniently had a map printed on the back. She held it up. I think I can manage with this. Well, all right. Let me know if you have any problems or questions. Have a good first day, Miss Swan. Thanks. Walking through the hall, Bella was too focused on the map to notice the stares and whispers she continued to get. Nan, however, was not. You'd think these people would have better things to do than stare. Bella looked up, amused as she watched Nan sidestep someone. You don't have to do that. You know, it's not like they'll bump into you. And let some teenage boy walk through me? I don't think so. Give them a break. It's probably the closest they'll ever get to being inside a woman. She chuckled at the strangled sound Nang released. I fear I've taught you a little too well. A girl staring intently at her cell phone bumped into Bella, not even sparing an apology or bothering to look up from her texting. Cell phones in school. Everything was so much simpler when I went to school. Another girl passed by in a pair of skin-tight jeans, heels, and a stomach-bearing top, and a lot less indecent. Is this you wishing for the days of pleated ankle-length skirts, corporal punishment, and chalkboards serving as notepads? Chalkboards, Nan choked. I'm not that old, Missy. Bella passed by an open door. This is my class. She walked a few steps further down the bank of lockers before stopping in front of one. And this is my locker. It took her a few times, but Bella finally twisted the lock open and opened the door. A faint scent of overripe bananas and sweat wafted out. Perfect! She was tempted to leave her jacket on for fear it would absorb the odor, but figuring she didn't want to stick out anymore. Then she already did, she shrugged it off and hanged it from the hook that was available. Closing the locker, she walked back towards the classroom, throwing a glance over at Nan, who had remained in place. You coming? I think I should sit these first day classes out, chiming. Give you a chance to gather your bearings. I'll see you at lunch, and you can tell me everything, okay? All right, Bella agreed as Nan disappeared. Bella was never really sure where Nan went or what she did, but she figured it wasn't any of her business anyways. Though knowing her mischievous Nan, she'd probably be making objects float somewhere and scaring the bebbers out of someone. Though Nan had always maintained her innocence. There had been an incident involving Myra Muntz, Nan's oldest rival, running out of her house in the dead of night in nothing more than a nightgown, with curlers in her hair and night cream on her face, screaming that her house was haunted. She ended up moving out of town 2 weeks later. Yes, Bella thought, offering a half smile at the curious teacher. I definitely don't want to know. So, how was it? Bella leaned further back into the tree, the turkey sandwich she had purchased at the cafe in one hand and a book in the other. She was the only one in the small courtyard and had no doubt that more than a few people were giving her a peculiar look from the windows that lined the cafeteria walls. She was just so used to eating outdoors in Phoenix, and it was proving to be a hard habit to break. Considering it was almost February, it obviously wasn't as warm as she'd hoped, and the sky was depressingly overcast. But there wasn't snow on the ground today, not like she was sitting directly on the ground anyways. A conveniently placed tree root took care of that. Besides, it's still relatively mild enough to be comfortable, and there was a refreshingly crisp scent to the air. Not bad, she replied. She figured they were already staring at the weird girl outside and really didn't want to upgrade that to the weird girl talking to herself outside, so she kept the conversation silent. Pretty much what I was expecting. Stares, whispers, a few curious questions. Any potential friends in the lot? Bella shrugged. Not really. There was a girl in my English class, Laura, or Lauren maybe. I can't really remember who attempted to engage. She came on sort of aggressive, and the guy next to her practically leered at me when she wasn't looking. They invited me to sit with them. Well, he did, I should say. Why didn't you? I thought I was supposed to ease into my first day. Nothing about those two screamed easy. She smirked. At least not in the way I'm implying. You're horrible. The girl was the same indecent one from earlier this morning. Ooh, well, I take it back then. Bella finished off the last bite of her sandwich and reached down to grab the bottle of water resting beside her bag. Chime. The entreating tone in Na's voice had Bella abandoning her quest for the bottle and turning toward her with a questioning gaze. Instead of explaining, Nan pointed. She followed her line of sight in time to see the equivalent of a Gap model parade marching towards the exterior cafeteria doors. Seriously, even from her distance, she could tell that the group of 5 teens were ridiculously attractive. Thanks to her position and that of the tree, it wasn't exactly in the middle of the courtyard, but a few feet to the right instead, and the fact that they were facing her direction, she was angled perfectly to watch their approach and was tempted to stare. Knowing she could sense it whenever someone was doing the same though, she returned her eyes to the open book in her hand. Name, she asked. No problem, Chime. Bella relaxed her mind and was immediately assaulted with a barrage of images. It wasn't something she did often, considering it usually left her with a wicked headache, and she never had any reason to use this particular ability that Nan had anyways. But she was now seeing what Nan saw. The group was led by a petite black-haired girl. She had elfin facial features, and her small body was draped in clothing that practically screamed, "I'm designer and you could never afford me." Although judging by the eye-watering shade of pink her shirt was, she overpaid. Besides her feet, the rest of her body seemed to be in a perpetual state of motion, as she waved her hands and talked excitedly to the stone-faced boy beside her. Like the girl, his clothes were of the higher end and perfectly pressed. In fact, everything about him was styled to a T. From the tip of his Bella-imagined, deliberately messy bronze hair, down the gray cashmere sweater and black slacks that encased his thin body to the shine shoes he had on his feet. Taken together, the whole outfit made him look like a teacher's assistant, and if it wasn't for his obvious youth, Bella would have easily believed it. He is too pretty to be a boy, she decided. But the broody look on his face pretty much ruined any appeal he might have had. He looked like he had issues, major ones. The other three trailed slightly behind them, as if they weren't in a particular hurry to get to their destination. Two of them were an obvious couple, judging by their entwined hands. The female half of the pairing was incredibly beautiful. Her long, straight blonde hair brushed past her shoulders. She appeared to be roughly the same height as Nanan and possession of a rather voluptuous figure, which was enhanced by the tailored outfit she wore. Unlike the other two, though, Bella imagined she could wear a garbage bag and still manage to look fabulous, added to the classical beauty of her face. Bella was in serious danger of developing a bit of a girl crush. "She looks like Jin Harlow," Nan commented. Though her lovely facial features shared of the same sternness, or perhaps the correct word would be haughtiness, as the glowy bronzed-haired boy, it was softened by the indulgent smile aimed at dark, short-haired male she held hands with. Thanks to his impressive size, built like a linebacker, Nan muttered, the dark black shirt he wore practically stretched to the limits over his chest. He could almost be considered intimidating, almost, if not for the boyish grin that lit up the boyish features of his face and the dimples it produced, as he shared a laugh with the final member of the group, who was sadly half blocked by the laughing giant's ridiculously large frame. All Bella could make out was a flash of green and a head of blonde hair. "Do you want me to move closer?" Nan offered. Though strangely intrigued, Bella shook her head. "Nah, I'm sure I'll see them around school." Nan cut off the connection and was silent for a moment. "Really look at them for a second, Shame?" Bella raised her eyes up from her book. As long as she kept it short, she could indulge Nan. "Yeah? Are you seeing what I'm seeing?" Bella squinted. Now that she looked harder, she realized how unnaturally pale they all were, and how they were dressed rather light for strolling around outside in January. Sure, she probably wasn't one to judge. Hello, sitting outside in the cold. But she had a thick wool jacket on. And why were they entering the cafeteria from the outside anyways? Where were they coming from? They also appeared to share the same golden eyes. But she had a feeling that none of those things were what Manon was referring to. No, she was undoubtedly talking about the almost indiscernible shimmery silver glow that encased all 6 members. She turned to Nan, seeing the same slightly brighter glow. Depends. What exactly are you seeing? Death. Wow, melodramatic much. The group had finally reached the cafeteria doors, and Bella watched as a younger red-haired girl who had just exited stepped back in awe and managed to catch a brief glimpse of the back of the 5th member as they entered. Despite the length of the golden hair, the slight swagger to their walk, and the leanness of their frame made her absolutely certain it was a Hiei. She admired the flex of his shoulders under the dark green fabric, my favorite color, she noted absently, and the way the faded blue jeans he wore hugged his, hips. She wondered if the front looked as good as the back. "I'm pretty sure they're not ghosts. That girl there is obviously seeing them," said Girl, wavered on her feet. "She looks like she's going to swoon, actually." "I didn't say they were ghosts, Chime." "So what?" Some mad scientist injected a bunch of teenage corpses with some experimental serum, and they came back all reanimator style. She chuckled. "Or better yet, maybe they're all..." She trailed off. "Oh God, they're vampires, aren't they?" She groaned and began thumping her head against the tree. Best first day ever. Jasper ignored the food on his tray. It's not like he was going to eat it anyways. And Subtlety turned his gaze back towards the window to observe the peculiar girl who was now lightly banging her head against the trunk of the tree she was leaning on. He had noticed her out of the corner of his eye when he had first walked by. It was hard not to notice someone sitting outside in the middle of winter, and had been intrigued by the mild curiosity that had quickly turned into disinterest, when she turned her attention back to the book in her hand. Obviously, the book couldn't have been that exciting because, so far, she hadn't turned a single page in 10 minutes. Most of the humans at this school, or anywhere really, couldn't help but stare at them with some form of awe, lust, fear, or some combination of the three, so her reaction was a little strange. Apparently, Jasper wasn't being as inconspicuous as he thought. "Who is that?" An amused voice boomed from his right. Jasper turned to see Emmett grinning mischievously, a totally caught-you-bro look on his face. "New girl," Rose supplied. "Haven't you heard the people talking around school about her?" "Yeah, they say she's weird," Alice piped up. "And obviously they're right. What kind of person eats their lunch outside in January?" Jasper ignored her. They weren't really ones to judge. Half of them had strolled in here in clothes that would be better fit for spring. "What's her name?" he asked Rose instead. "Swan something? She's Chief Swan's daughter, apparently." "She's cute," Emmett cut in with a playful leer, which was subsequently wiped out by a forceful jab to his ribs by the blonde beauty beside him. "She's beautiful," Jasper corrected internally, admiring the tilt of her face as she threw back her head and laughed at something. The movement sent the long locks that had been gathered on her shoulder tumbling behind her back, enhanced eyes skidded over smooth, pale skin that almost rivaled theirs, and soft, delicate features that were slightly distorted thanks to the glass that was between him and her. He wished he were closer so he could get a better look, and to find out that that wonderful, but sadly faint scent that tickled his nose belonged to her. He turned away from the window with a slight grimace. Having some strange guy standing over you, too intrigued to do anything but stare and smell you, he couldn't imagine that would go over too well. Even less if she knew what he was. "One of them is staring at you again?" "Probably perusing the menu," Bella replied cheekily, throwing her head back with a laugh. "You're taking this surprisingly well." "Why wouldn't I? I've been seeing and talking to my dead grandmother for years. It takes a lot to faze me." "This is different, Chem. This isn't the first time I've heard the V word. Nan..." It had been a year after the Mr. Steiner incident and mere months before her death when Nan had sat her down at the kitchen table, a solemn look on her face. "I'd like to share something with you. Something you can never tell anyone else." Equal parts excited and scared, 11-year-old Bella had nodded. "It was early spring of '49, and I was 2 months pregnant with your grandmother, Sandra. I had a job at this little mom-and-pop store that was about a 10-minute walk from our house at the time. It didn't pay much, but it helped get us by. My Will, rest his soul, was just getting his carpentry business off the ground, and with one child already and another on the way, we needed all the help we could get. One day I was working, we had a problem with one of the girls, and I was asked to work a double. Though Will hated me working at night, I took it anyways. We couldn't afford a car at that point, so when I couldn't get a drive from one of the other girls, I usually walked home. I had never had a problem before, so I didn't hesitate." She paused to take a long sip of the lukewarm tea in front of her. "There was a shortcut through an alley that cut 5 minutes off my walk, and though I had never used it at night before, usually opting to take the long way around when I worked the odd late shift, I was bone tired at that point and anxious to get home. Focused on the opening alley ahead of me, and that I was halfway home, I didn't hear it when someone came up behind me. All I felt was someone crashing into me and pushing me into the brick wall of one of the shops. Hard. I managed to twist myself so that my shoulder took the impact. There was no lights in the alley, and the only one was on the street a few meters away from us. It was enough to give the rough impression of a male figure, but all I could really make out were his eyes. They glowed red. I screamed, and he covered my mouth. His hand was so cold, she shivered in remembrance. Then he leaned towards my neck, and she trailed off and beckoned Bella over. Pulling down the shoulder of her shirt, she drew her gaze to a faint mark that Bella had never noticed before. "Man, those look like bite marks?" She nodded. Bella raised one shaking hand and softly traced the indentations. "It's cold," she exclaimed. "That part of skin has always been cooler than normal for some reason." Was it a part of her felt too silly to even ask, and Nan seemed to sense it. "Believe me, Chang, a part of me has felt the same way for almost 50 years. But I haven't doubted for a single second that I was dealing with a vampire that night. How did you get away?" That part is even more incredible. He had only had his teeth in me for 30 seconds, though in my terror it felt like hours, when he was ripped away and I could hear the sounds of a struggle, followed by the most horrible metallic screeching sound. Then a male voice in the darkness spoke. "You're safe, ma'am. Go home, and stay out of dark alleyways in the future." She chuckled at this part. The last thing I saw before I ran the rest of the way home was a flash of bright gold, and though I'm not sure why, a part of me just knew that my rescuer was a vampire too. You mean like a good vampire? I don't know if there is such a thing, sweetheart. Maybe I just caught him on a day he was feeling generous. Did you tell great-granddaddy? It would be the first and only moment I had ever lied to him in our 44 years together. I told him a dog had bitten me. A dog? Bella replied skeptically. He had been so concerned for me and the baby, I think he would have believed anything I told him. But he did make me promise never to work a night shift again. That was a promise I had no trouble keeping. Why are you telling me then? Those feelings you get, Chime. I'm not foolish enough to believe he was the only one. And with the way the world has changed, who knows how well they can blend in with the rest of us. So, like I told you that day, always trust your feelings. And if they have red eyes, run. Remembering that conversation, the smile faded from her lips. Should I be worried? Do you think they'll hurt me? I can't answer that, Nan admitted honestly. Well, the gold eyes. That could have been the flash you seen that night. That could mean they're good vampires. Possibly, but you have to remember that, while red definitely means stop, yellow means proceed with caution. The bell rang, bringing an end to the heavy conversation. And that means I have to proceed to class. We'll need to discuss this more, James. The fact that they're out during the day, Nan looked up at the overcast sky, sun or not, changes things significantly. Bella stood and dusted off the back of her pants. It's not like I can go home right now. Nan on. Renee's on the road with Phil again. She couldn't be sure if she even would go back, if it had been an option. Nan had been the binding glue between the two of them, and when she died, things had gotten tense. She had always sensed that Renee was a little overwhelmed by being a mother, and without Nan around to, as harsh as it sounded, force her into playing her role. She had just given up. It might not have to come to that. The fact they were making an effort to blend in by going to high school of all things must mean something. Nan stared off in the distance. Listen, I'll meet you at home. Seems like I have to look a little closer at this town. Be careful. I will, I promise. Have fun in biology, she added before disappearing. Yeah, fun, she muttered. Come on, Jazzy, I'll walk to class with you. Emmett snickered like he always did when Alice called him that ridiculous nickname. Alice, Jasper replied exasperatedly. Your class is on the opposite side of the building. So, I can still... Emmett stood cutting her off. Sorry, Allie, but he already promised to walk me to my class. Isn't that right, Jazzy? He asked, fluttering his eyelashes at him, flirtatiously. Jasper was tempted to send him a shitload of lust just as Hector, Forks High's only out student who had a ridiculous crush on Emmett, walked by. Right, Emmy, he replied through clenched teeth instead. But Jazzy, Alice whined. Edward closed a hand around Alice's thin arm with a haughty sniff. Come on, you can walk me to biology. Fine, Alice pouted as she let Edward tug her away. When she was finally gone, Emmett turned to Jasper with a grin. So, do you want to hold hands to class, Jazz? I will kill you in your sleep, Jasper cut him off with a sinister hiss. Ha! Emmett pointed at him in triumph. We don't sleep, so there. Jasper cocked an eyebrow and Emmett swayed as he was hit with an overwhelming wave of lethargy. Wosho. He blinked drowsily. Jasper smirked. You were saying... Argument firmly in his back pocket, Jasper lazily made his way towards class, chuckling as Emmett whispered hysterically to Rose behind him. If he can make me tired, what the hell else can he make me feel? He could hear the amusement in Rose's voice when she answered. Oh, we'll definitely be finding that out later. Babe. With her first day officially under her belt, and feeling sufficiently creeped out, Bella made a beeline towards the office the minute the final bell rang. The clacking stopped when Miss Cope looked up from her keyboard. Miss Swan, how was your first day? It was fine, thank you. Is there something I can help you with? Bella nodded. You said something about switching my schedule this morning. Is that still possible? Well, yes. Miss Cope returned her attention to the computer, and with a few clicks of the mouse, pulled up the proper document. What class was it you were interested in switching again? Biology, Bella stated firmly. An hour later, Bella breathed a sigh of relief now that she was safely ensconced in the semi-familiarity of her childhood bedroom. So why did you switch that class again, Shame? One of them was in the same class. He didn't feel right, Nan, and his eyes, Nan replied, panicked. They didn't turn red, did they? No, they were dark, black. She shuddered. Hungry, she admitted silently to herself. She had fallen off the minute she had walked into the classroom, which was completely understandable. It's not every day one finds out that they're attending school with not one, which was bad enough, but 5 vampires. She may have been blasé about the whole thing with Nan, but the truth was, it had left her unsettled. Nan was right. There was no proof these were good vampires. They could just be using this place as their personal feeding ground. She eyed a cluster of laughing teens in the corner as she approached the teacher's desk. She doubted the students would be this cheerful if they were really being picked off one by one. The bell rang as a teacher took the slip of paper from her hand and murmured a welcome. After glancing down at it, he turned to the now-seated students, and she scanned the classroom as he gave a brief introduction, smiling wanly as he introduced her, Isabella. The smile slipped from her lips when her eyes connected with a dark glare that belonged to the broodier member of the Vamp 5, the teacher's assistant. And wasn't it just her luck? The only empty seat was right next to him. The teacher made me sit by him. He spent the entire hour glaring at me and holding his breath like he smelled something rank. She sniffed at herself consciously. Do I smell? Nan patted the bed space beside her and encouraged Bella to curl up next to her. Perhaps, James, but not the way you're thinking, she murmured gravely. Bella shuddered again. Then I made the right decision. I sure as hell am not going to sit through another class of that. I agree. Nan began to run her fingers soothingly through her hair, and Bella took a few minutes to enjoy the sensation. Did you find anything out? She asked drowsily. Nan nodded. They live in a house at the edge of town in the woods, about a mile off the road. It's an interesting house, I'll give you that. Definitely not what I expected. But it's a bit of an eyesore, especially for a simple town like this. An eyesore, huh? Is it worse than that orange and lime green house we passed on the way to school? Nothing is worse than that house. Bella was curious. What weren't you expecting? Windows? Half of that house seemed to be made of glass. Bella sat up, but how is that possible? Chime, all anyone really thinks they know about vampires comes from Hollywood. Who knows what they got wrong? Or worse, what they got right? Anything else? There was a woman fiddling with a flower arrangement in the kitchen, which I might add was fully stocked with every gleaming appliance imaginable. Why they'd need them, I haven't the slightest idea. Bella groaned. Nodden, please tell me you didn't go into the house. Didn't you hear the part about the overabundance of windows? She asked, exasperated. There was a large one spanning across the back kitchen wall that gave me a nice, clear view. Now may I continue? She huffed. Bella stifled a grin and nodded. She looked older than the other 5, so I'm assuming she's the mother figure. She got a call from someone named Carlisle, who... She trailed off at the suspicious look on Bella's face. Oh, for heaven's sake, the window was open. I don't just go tramping around in people's houses, you know. Mrs. Muntz, Bella replied smugly. Nan turned her head away. I'm sure I don't have the slightest idea what you're talking about. Right, Bella smirked. Anyways, Nan continued loudly, judging by the cutesy name she called him, he's probably her husband. Which brings the total up to 7. She paused and shook her head, mystified. I know I should be worried, but honestly, vampires calling each other Honey Bear. What has the world come to? Bella snickered. I bet Bram Stoker's rolling in his grave right now. It wouldn't surprise me if he was a vampire who wrote that story himself, but padded it because he was too embarrassed to show the fuzzy side. Not all vampires are fuzzy, Bella replied solemnly. No, Nan agreed, raising a hand to rub at her scar. They're not. Sliding from the bed, Bella began pacing the room. So what do we do now? Nan shook her head sadly. Dude, I doubt there's much we can do. Bella's shoulders slumped. She was right. The only person she could really ask for help from would be Charlie, but that thought disappeared as quickly as it came. She could just imagine that conversation. Charlie, there's a group of vampires in Forks, 5 of which are teens. I go to school with... There'd be a pause. Then a tear would begin to stubbornly trail its way down a grizzled cheek. Don't worry, he'd swear, turning away and biting his knuckles to prevent a frustrated sob. Your mother and I will get you the best help money can buy. Hours later, she'd be strapped into a straitjacket and loaded into an ambulance by 2 burly orderlies as she screamed about vampires, dead grandmothers, and the gnomes that hid in her dresser drawers and stole her socks so she never had a matching pair. Sock gnomes, Bella mumbled, glancing down as she wiggled the toes of the mismatched pair currently on her feet. For the last time, Chibe. If they exist, I don't know anything about them. Bella was firmly convinced she had to say that. And I'm not just saying it because of some sort of gnome conspiracy. Nan flashed her an amused but loving smile. Did I ever tell you that I love your thought process, sometimes? Of course. That's why I'm your favorite grandchild. You're my only grandchild, Nan corrected. Bella made a pshaw sound. Technicalities. Downstairs, a door banged open and Charlie's voice traveled up the stairs. Bella, you home? Don't you think that the truck parked in the driveway would have already answered that question? Nan commented wryly. Be nice, Bella whispered before raising her voice to yell. Yeah, I'm here. Well, come downstairs. I brought home pizza for supper. That shooed her out of the room, and Bella crossed her fingers as she trudged down the stairs. Please don't let there be anchovies. Hope you like anchovies. Best day ever. The final warning bell pealed as Bella raced towards her classroom. Her second day, and already she was late. Guess there was something about going to school with vampires that really made you not want to get up in the morning. She stumbled through the door just as the bell tapered off, smiling sheepishly at the warning look her teacher shot her, and quickly made her way towards her seat. This really isn't necessary, Bella insisted, as Nan trailed behind her. Chime! Until we can be absolutely sure that nothing is going to happen, I'm going to accompany you to your classes. But now that I've dropped biology, I don't even have classes with any of them. You switched one class for another. You don't know that for certain. She really hated when Nan was right. Not psychic. My ass. Pouting, Bella headed towards her new class, rubbing her chapped hands together in an attempt to generate some heat. It probably hadn't been the best idea, stubbornly insisting on eating outside despite the significant drop in temperature. She had listened to Nan scold her for a good 15 minutes before finally snapping. Considering my luck lately, the only available table will be right beside them. I really don't think I can handle 45 minutes of being glared at while Mr. Teal licks his damn lips. Nan had remained silent for the rest of the lunch break. I'm sorry, Nan. She finally offered when she'd stopped by her locker to stuff her jacket in. It's all right, Chime. I know this is going to be difficult to work around. And it's only my second day, she bemoaned. Reaching the door to her history class, she was thankful she was wearing a hoodie with pockets, gratefully sticking her chilled hands into them. Head down, she shuffled through the door, grumbling to herself. Serves me right for not listening to... She trailed off as she felt the familiar sensation of being stared at, and jerked her head up, just as Nan inhaled sharply. Groaning silently, Bella once again lamented her luck. It seems she had traded in a class with only one vampire to one with three. Jasper's head rose when a semi-familiar scent drew closer to the door, growing in strength with each passing second. It was the scent from the courtyard yesterday, only stronger. The smell of peaches and cream. The strongest and really only memory that remained of his younger, human years had involved him falling asleep under a peach tree. The warm sun beating down on him through the branches and the smell of the sweet, ripe fruit surrounding him. Given its rarity, it was a memory he cherished, and he felt like he was back under that tree as a figure appeared in the doorway and he was hit with the full power of their scent. It was her. Rose must have seen the look on his face, because she leaned across her desk, concerned, and in a voice low enough for only him and Emmett to hear, whispered, Are you all right? I'm fine. Even he could hear the surprise in his voice. But it seemed like for the first time in, well, ever really, his throat didn't burn and he didn't feel any desire for her blood. Instead, he felt comfort mixed with the intoxicating and almost unheard of, at least for him, taste of peace. And if her scent wasn't perfect enough, she had the look to match it as well. He had tried to catch a glimpse of her this morning in the parking lot, but there was no sight of her even 5 minutes before the first bell rung. Not wanting to draw any of the other suspicions, or more specifically, Alice's, he had given up and reluctantly made his way to class. But now he was getting his chance, and he wasn't disappointed. Her hair was loose again today, and the long, thick locks spilled over the tight hoodie that stretched over her generous curves. The dark burgundy of the fabric, added together with the lighting overhead, offset the similarly colored natural highlights spun throughout her glossy hair. A pair of dark blue skinny jeans clung to her long, lithe legs, and a battered pair of forest green Converse were on her feet. His head was tilted down towards said feet, so at first he couldn't get a clear look at her face. That changed when Rose and Emmett grew curious about what had drawn and subsequently captured his attention, and turned to stare as well. No doubt feeling the weight of the three heavy gazes, her head had snapped up. He was convinced. She was perfect. Her clear skin wasn't as pale as it had appeared the other day. Instead, a rosy blush tinged her high cheekbones. Not from any makeup that he was certain of. He had seen her shivering out in the courtyard at lunch and had shut Alice down when she made a scathing remark questioning the girl's sanity. Dark eyebrows curved slightly over wide chocolate eyes framed with thick, sooty lashes. She had a small, thin nose that trailed down towards pouty, dusty rose lips. Lips she was currently nibbling on. Jasper fought the urge to groan and reached out to sample her emotions, equal parts surprised and confused by what he felt. They were amazingly steady for a teenager, a female teenager at that. They simply flowed into one emotion after the next, instead of rapidly flicking through them like a bunny on speed, which sadly was the norm. The people at this school had issues, and if it were possible, he was certain he'd go home with a headache every day. Though he supposed having to feed more often than the others could probably be considered the vampire version of a headache. She went from surprise to resignation to Jasper grinned internally as she watched her blush lightly. Attraction back to frustration tinged in anger before finally settling on resolve as she straightened her back and marched stiffly over to Mr. Hill's desk. His gaze fell back to his desk, and he frowned as he ran over his emotions in his head. It wasn't so much the main ones that had confused him, but the slight sprinkle that had tainted each one. It was so faint he almost hadn't caught it. Why was she feeling fear? No, Nan. Dropping this class is not an option. I need the credit, and I don't really feel like going to summer school to get it. Maybe you could do some sort of homeschool thing for it instead. Even if I could, would you like to explain to them why I want to drop this class so quickly after dropping the first one? Her shoulder figuratively slumped. I can't spend the rest of this year and the next walking around on eggshells. I won't, she decided firmly, swallowing her fear and crossing the room to the teacher's desk and handing him her slip. More students drifted in as he glanced down at it. Welcome to history, Isabella. She wasn't doing this again. I prefer Bella, she replied politely. Bella, he reiterated with a nod. I'm Mr. Hill, and I was once a new kid myself, so I won't make you go through the pain of having to introduce yourself to the rest of the class. They'll get to know you soon enough. She doubted it, but nodded her head in agreement anyways. The bell rang loudly, as a few stragglers strolled through the door. The seats aren't assigned, so feel free to sit where you like. Bella wanted to scoff. She had gotten here a week into classes, definitely long enough for territory to be clearly staked. She looked around the room and saw only 3 empty seats. One was in the front of Miss Hill's desk, a seat that Bella would sooner listen to 12 continuous hours of nails on a chalkboard before sitting in. The other was in the back row beside the hulking Gevamp, who was grinning in her direction, and the final in front of the back corner desk where judging by the familiar golden hair, last member of the Agwaza teenage vampire group sat. His head was bowed, and the slightly wavy locks barely grazed the desk top. Strangely comforted by his passive-aggressive stance, much better than being glared at, she decided. She bypassed the front desk, studiously ignored Mr. Smiley, and slid into the third choice, stumbling slightly when Topaz's eyes peeked at her briefly from behind the curtain of his hair. She cursed at the warmth that bloomed in her cheeks at the deep chuckle that unquestionably belonged to the grinning goof. Nian floated by her and perched herself on a low table that was conveniently situated against the wall next to Bella's desk. I'm not sure if this was the best place, Chime. I'd rather sit in front of one than beside one. I already learned that lesson the first time. The front seemed fine to me. There's a reason that seat is empty, Nan. I'll be fine. Cutting off the mental conversation, she pulled out a fresh notebook from her bag and resolutely looked forward. Just gotta keep my eyes forward and ignore them, she told herself. Something told her it wasn't going to be as easy as that. Though she was positive it was all in her head, it was like she could feel the breath of the male behind her ruffling her hair. But unless super breath was a vampire ability, and if it was, worst power ever, she doubted it was possible. There was enough space for a person, albeit a skinny person, to squeeze between each desk. She supposed he could be currently leaning over said desk, but she hoped to God Nan would give her a heads up if some strange vampire was breathing heavily on her like some pervert making an obscene phone call. But at least she could say it was a resounding yes to the question she had asked herself yesterday. The boy behind her definitely looked as good from the front as he did from the back. Better even. She'd never admit it to Nan, but despite the initial flash of fear that had been the real reason she'd hesitated in the doorway. When his eyes had connected with hers, she had been stunned. At her old high school, there had been this quintessential surfer blonde guy who had been a transfer from California. All the girls would subsequently drop 10 IQ points and turn into giggling, flirty messes whenever he was around. Of course, Bella, not seeing what the big deal was considering his arrogant personality detracted from whatever attractiveness he might have had been partnered with him for a big English project. He had blown her off the entire week before finally inviting her over to his house the day before it was due to work on it. Apparently, what he wanted to work on was her. He spent the better part of an hour trying to cajole her into bed, convinced she had been merely playing hard to get. Somehow, kneeing him in the junk and calling him a douche had turned into, she was all over me, man. The next day, she decided she would hate all blonde men on principle after that. That pretty much disappeared as she eyed his silky blonde stands, her fingers twitching in her pocket as they made their desperation to run through it known. He was as beautiful as the other four, but his looks were a bit more rugged and lacked the vaguely feminine qualities that the broody one possessed, or the adorableness of the large pyre. Chiseled would be a better word to describe his features, and added with his pale skin was enough to make her believe that Michelangelo himself had carved them from the finest marble. Eyebrows a shade or two darker than his hair sat over intense, melted gold eyes that were similar to his, what did you call a group of vampires anyway? For murder, perhaps, she snorted. Kin, but somehow different. A little harder, like they had seen things that they couldn't unsee. His lush, pale pink lips were pulled up slightly at one corner. I want to kiss them, she realized with sudden clarity. She felt a blush creep on her cheeks at the wayward thought. All in all, the attraction was immediate and staggering, and it took all her willpower to grow angry enough at herself in an attempt. Build up the resolve it took to finally march over to the teacher's desk. I am not attracted to a vampire, she told herself, as the teacher began rattling off attendance. She tuned out the names being called, before going rigid when the name Jasper Hale was said, and a throaty voice, with only slightest hint of a southern inflection on account of the short word, answered, present. She didn't have to look around to know who said that, or the bell-like voice who answered to the name Rosiavli Hale. Brother and sister, she pondered. It made sense. They did look enough alike to be considered siblings. She heard Nan sigh girlishly beside her. Do you hear that, Chime? It's going to be so hard to hate a man with a southern accent. Her Grampy Will had been from Dallas, and though she had never heard his accent in person, Nan had a recording he had gifted her with on their 40th wedding anniversary a few years before he passed away. On it, he had strummed along to a guitar, his thick drawl crooning along to You Are My Sunshine. When she was a little girl, Nana would play it for Bella every night before she went to bed. Tears would always be glistening in her eyes by the end of it, and as she got older, she had made Bella promise that she'd marry a Southern man, because Southern men are hard workers who are good to their mamas, and any man that is good to his mother will be good to you. I believe we've had the conversation about judging people on their accents before. Now, if you're talking about the two people I think you're talking about, that had everything to do with their rotten personalities. The fact that they both happen to have the same accent is irrelevant. Sure, her attention was drawn back away from Natchan by the loud voice that shouted, I have graced you with my presence yet again, in response to the name Emmett McCarty being called. Ducking her head and using her hair as a shield, she gave into the urge to grin. There was no question about it now. The guy was obviously a big goof. But was it all an act? Did each of the vampires have a part they played so they could blend in? So far, it was Emmett the Goofy, Rosalie the Beauty Queen, Ed Something the Creepy, and Jasper the mysteriously good-looking. In addition to the parental figures Nain had told her about yesterday, one of which she only knew the name of, that left two without names, the mother figure and the short, pixie-like one. She wondered what roles they played. She spent the rest of the class in a daze, and despite the notes on the board, her notebook remained as pristine as when she first opened it. That was definitely a productive class, she snarked to Nan as the bell rang. Whose fault was that? Aren't you supposed to be on my side? You were the one that said you weren't going to let them interfere with passing this class, Chime. Quiet you, she grumbled, reaching over for the bag she had placed on the floor at the side of her desk closest to Nan. She looked up when she felt a waft of air, signaling that someone had walked by her, the delicious scent of dark chocolate and cinnamon tickling her nose, and found herself once again admiring the muscles of a familiar back flex beneath the fabric that covered it. Navy blue this time. It paired nicely with his pale skin. No man has the right to smell that good, she mumbled, flushing when he paused briefly at the door, his lips quirking before following Beauty and the Brawn out. Okay, superhearing was a definite go. Damn it. Jasper watched as Emmett fidgeted behind the wheel. What was that? He finally asked. What was what? Jasper replied lazily, turning to stare out the window. They were almost home. He was actually surprised that Emmett had managed to last this long without asking. That class? What was going on with that girl? Nothing, Jasper replied uneasily. Even after spending an entire class staring at the back of her head and the class afterwards staring blankly at the board, he was still trying to filter through the whole thing himself. J-Man, I may be slow on the uptake sometimes, but that wasn't nothing. I was just getting a feel for the new girl that everyone was talking about. Oh, I believe you wanted to feel her all right, Emmett smirked. His face grew serious. But really, what was that? I don't know, Jasper reluctantly admitted. He had an inkling about what it was, but wasn't sure if he wanted to put a name to it right yet. He frowned when he caught Rosier's knowing smile reflected in the windshield glass. What? Nothing, she said, mimicking Jasper's accent. They pulled into the dooryard, and Jasper grimaced as he caught sight of Edward's silver Volvo already parked in the driveway. He had a feeling Alice was waiting in the house, prepared to give him hell for refusing to drive home with her today. Not that it was different from every other day, and really wanted to get a chance to center his thoughts before it inevitably happened. It was impossible to put off an alley run forever, as much as you may wish it. Leaving his bag in the Jeep, he hopped out, throwing, "I'm going for a hunt," over his shoulder. "But I want to know," Emmett whined behind him. "Join the club," Jasper thought as he darted into the trees. "What is it, Chime?" Bella sighed. She had been playing it cool since the minute she got home, but she should have known better than to try to fool Nan. "Nothing," she said, pulling on her pajama pants. She winced when she got hit with the full power of Nangan's. "Tell me or I'll stare." "It's just... Arg, I don't know," she exclaimed, throwing her hands in the air. She shot a guilty look at the closed door, where the muted sounds of a baseball game drifted up from downstairs, and lowered her voice. I don't... It's just..." Finally giving up, she slumped down on the bed. Nan took a seat beside her and encouraged her to spread out. Pulling the covers over her, she gently ran a hand through her hair. "You don't have to explain anything, Chime. I know this is all a lot to take in, but I don't think that's it, Nan." There was a vulnerable quiver to her voice. "I've seen some strange things," she mumbled, with a fond smile, as she wound her fingers through Nan's warm hand. "I should be scared. I know I should be, but this feels different. It feels like my life is about to change. And I don't know if it's good thing or bad thing. We'll figure it out." She shushed. Bella closed her eyes when Nan began humming gently, and despite it being nowhere near Christmas, let the sound of silver bells lull her to sleep. Thursday. One more day, and she would officially have 2 weeks at Forks High under her belt, and thankfully all the blood still in her body. "I can't believe it's been that long already," she mused as she methodically peeled an orange and stared forlornly out the cafeteria window. It was raining, again, and she had been forced to eat her lunch inside at the small side table she had claimed as her own. And yes, she was alone. In her defense, she had given the social thing the old college try at the beginning of the week by finally accepting Leary Guy, who she had eventually learned was Tyler, and Indecent Girls, aka Lauren, invitation to sit with them at lunch. Lauren's was still as unenthusiastic as it had been that very first day. She blamed it on being thrown off by the growing attraction to a vampire, one who she could feel staring at her every class, but instead of making her feel uneasy like Glarepire, it just made her feel warm. Oh yeah, and the fact that it had been raining that day. So why was she sitting alone today and not with them? One word, man. It had been awkward the minute she sat down. She had a feeling that not a lot of exciting things happened in this town. Oh, if they only knew what was sitting right across the cafe, because the 2 boys and 2 girls stared at her most uncomfortable minute of her life, like they expected her to start spilling her entire life story. All they got was a weak Bella for their efforts. She had never been a fan of talking about herself, but at least she had attempted to answer their questions, even if she had been a little vague, since Nan had been involved in so many aspects of her life, especially those that would be deemed interesting. There was really only so much she could share about herself. She doubted, "Well, I'm a Virgo, and, oh yeah, I also see my dead grandmother," would go over well. Soon, it appeared they had grown bored with the shiny new toy. She thinks it was right around the time she admitted to two girls that she hated shopping and quickly moved on to a new topic. Something about a CD from a band Bella had never heard of, judging by the terrible freestyle Tyler broke into after it was brought up, shooting her a "You so wanna date me now, don't you? Look when he finished." Yeah, no. Lauren had apparently seen them in concert and had launched into an exuberant tale about how the rapper had totally checked her out. Bella, listening with half an ear, had taken a sip of her chocolate milk just as Lauren reached an exciting part and began bouncing in her seat and gesturing wildly with her hands. Nan, who had remained silent in the background up until that point, found it necessary to loudly point out, "Good Lord, that girl needs to put on a bra." Long story short, it turns out snorting milk up your nose and spraying it all over the girl next to you and not being able to hold your laughter in afterwards. Not her fault, the goofy vamp's own boom of laughter was ridiculously infectious, was a surefire way to be blacklisted from a cafeteria table. For life, at least that's what she thinks was hidden somewhere in the mangled shrieks about stains and favor dot. This costs more than your entire wardrobe put together, shirts. So the next day, dismayed to realize it was raining yet again, she hadn't hesitated walking by them, head held high as she ignored the glare aimed at her and sitting at the table she now occupied. The one she found out was empty for a reason, thanks to the vent that seemed to continually blow out cool air, no matter what the temperature outside was. But May, as strange as it sounded, popularity had never been at the forefront of her mind. It became even less desirable when she finally embraced her inner weirdness. Let her freak flag fly, if you will, and she had really never regretted her decision to hang in the background. It wasn't like she was ever really alone anyways. It really is obvious. Nan's voice broke her out of her inner contemplation, and she noted that she was staring at their table again. She glanced at it herself, frowning slightly when she realized Jasper wasn't sitting with them today. Things had been weird since that first history class. There were moments when he'd almost seemed to hesitate as he walked by her desk, like he wanted to say something to her. She found herself hoping and dreading daily that he would, but so far, nothing. What is that? They're vampires. They haven't raised their forks to their mouths once yet. So? That doesn't mean anything. It could be easily explained by something as simple as I diet. If they really were human, I imagine it would take a lot of discipline to look that good. Her look turned thoughtful. Hey, you think blood is calories? She chuckled at Matt's disgusted grimace. Just a question. Why would they waste the money and food? Don't they know there are children starving in Africa? I kinda doubt the thought enters their minds. Well, I don't really understand why they go through so much effort. I've seen half a dozen students so far who haven't brought their lunch today. She pointed at a thin blonde a few tables over. And that girl has done nothing but chew gum for the last 3 days, so it's obviously not something they have to do. Props, Bella replied as the bell rang, for a play called Being Human. She stood and swept the orange peelings into her empty sandwich wrapping and crumpled it up. And us, she said, subtly motioning to the students gathering their belongings, were all the audience. Bella cursed as she knocked her book bag off the large hood of her truck, causing it to rip and spilling its contents everywhere. Just like at lunch, Jasper's seat had been empty and a sinking feeling in her gut and the knowing grin his sister shot her when she saw the dismayed look on her face had left her distracted the rest of the day. Enough so that she hadn't paid attention to how close she had gotten to her truck when she walked around it towards the door. I warned you that bag was way past its expiry date, Jane non-tutted, instinctively bending down to help her. Gonna look mighty suspicious to see a textbook floating into my hand, Nain. Nain fell back with a pout. Oh, phooey! Bella crouched and eyed the people, ignoring her as they walked by. One even making the effort to step over one of the books on the ground. You know, she mused thoughtfully. You're never so sure of your status in high school as you are when you drop something and no one helps you pick it up. Stuffing everything back into her torn bag as well as she could, she gave it a quick double check as she stood and noticed that her battered copy of Jane Eyre, the equivalent of comfort food to her, was still missing. Book, where's my book? She mumbled to herself, scanning the ground. It might have went under the truck, Nan suggested. Crouching back down, Bella shuffled over slightly and tilted. Sure enough, there it was, back far enough that she'd have to stretch to reach it. Of course, she grumbled, thanking her lucky stars that the truck was jacked up high enough on its tires that she only had to kneel. She grimaced slightly when the wetness from the pavement soaked at her jeans and balanced her weights on one hand as she reached with the other. Her fingertips graced the spine of the book. Almost there, almost. How the hell did it get pushed back this far? Chime, forget the book. To the left, now. Bella didn't even stop to consider Nane's words. Not when they had the same urgency in them, similar to the night her house burnt down. Snatching her hand back, she dived to the directed side, tucking and rolling like a seasoned pro. She faintly heard squealing tires and felt a rush of air disturb her hair before it was followed by a loud, metallic crunch. Standing up, she eyed the boy whose car was parked beside hers. He had paused sliding his keys in the door and was regarding her with something akin to awe. Dude, are you like a ninja or some shit? Some shit, Belle agreed distractedly, turning to survey the damage. There goes my favorite bag for good, she sighed resignedly. It had been crushed under the tire of the van that had crashed into her truck. Speaking of her truck, that damage actually wasn't that bad. She could tell the door was dented significantly, but considering the shape her truck was in, it really didn't look any worse for wear, and chances were that it was still perfectly drivable. She blandly noted the people rushing to help the moaning kid behind the wheel. Tyler, she realized wide-eyed when he finally looked up, who, other than the cut on his forehead, looked fine, throwing "You okay" in her direction as an afterthought. She understood, she supposed. She didn't feel like she was hurt in any way, and imagined, however she looked, reflected that, besides, these kids had no doubt grown up together and were more likely to look out for one of their own. Assuring those that asked that she was okay, including the slightly hysterical teacher that had run over, Bella scanned the parking lot as the sounds of sirens grew closer. She immediately noticed the group crowded off to the side. The blonde beauty looked bored. The goof looked like he was 2 seconds away from clapping his hands in excitement, and the glary ass looked confused. But it was the short, elfin girl beside him, the only team member she still didn't know the name of, not like she had made any real effort to learn it. That was the strangest of all. She looked pissed as hell. Jasper raised an eyebrow as Emmett bounced into the living room, excitement oozing from his pores. Dude, too bad you took today off to hunt, 'cause you totally missed it. Missed what? Jasper replied, disinterested. He was sure Emmett was going to share yet another story about some kid at school getting a little too excited about Rose walking by. Shared blood or not, that girl was his sister, and he really didn't want to hear her name and raging hard-on in the same sentence. That new girl? Bella almost got creamed by a freaking van. What? Jasper exclaimed, completely at attention now. Yeah, it was so cool. I mean, she just jumped out of the way like she was Bruce Lee reincarnated. Seconds before it happened. If it wasn't for her heartbeat, I'd swear she was a vampire, he exclaimed, mystified. He began bouncing in place. Man, watching that has left me so jacked. Rosie? He called, suggestively. Not now, Emmett. Rosie's aggravated voice traveled down the hall. He pouted. Fine, I'll just go take down a bear or something. I'll be back later, babe, he called, darting out the back door. Seconds after he was gone, a troubled Rose appeared around the corner. What's the matter? Can we go talk in your room? Alice and Edward? She shook her head. No, they took off as soon as they got home. I'd feel more comfortable discussing this in there. As in all the houses they had had over the years, he had gotten his room double soundproofed. While it didn't completely block the sounds, it did muffle it somewhat if they kept their voices low enough. It was just enough to offer a small semblance of privacy for whenever either of them, or occasionally Emmett as well, felt the need to discuss something they didn't want the others to overhear, which had become more necessary since his split from Alice 6 years ago. Closing the door behind him, he settled on the bed, frowning when Rose began to pace, her emotions shuffling from confusion to concern. What is it? I know Emmett was excited about everything, she paused with a fond smile, but it was strange. Strange? Jasper echoed. You mean her jumping out of the way like she did? No. I mean, yes. Obviously that was weird. She stopped and appeared to be collecting her thoughts. Remember that day last year when we first moved here? The day Alice claimed to have seen that boy choking and saved his life? Obviously she meant it as a rhetorical question. They never forgot anything. They had been a month into the school year, and the group of them were walking to lunch when Alice did what Emmett called the vision pause before suddenly darting around the corner, concerned. They had followed at a human pace, entering the cafeteria in time to see her performing the Heimlich maneuver on a boy that he and Alice shared a class with. one she usually flirted with in some sort of twisted attempt to make him jealous. She had thankfully managed to keep the pressure light enough so that she didn't crack his ribs, but it still didn't stop Rose from being pissed for taking the risk. Jasper nodded. The right place at the right time. That's what Alice had been told that day by the principal. Several teachers and her fawning admirer practically preening under all the thanks and praise she had been given. Or why didn't she do anything today? Can you imagine the praise she'd get for saving the new girl from an untimely end? Why would she pass up that opportunity? It's not like she could have ran over and pushed her out of the way, or even literally stopped the van. It would have drawn too much attention. I seem to remember how someone reacted to something similar last time. He hinted. Rose brushed the insinuation off. No, Jax, it wouldn't have had to come to that. She stared at the girl the minute she stepped outside those doors. She must have known something was going to happen, and could have easily intercepted her and given her some sort of belated welcome to Forks spiel. A last-minute change, he suggested. Rose's emotions shifted to frustration. Why are you defending her? She was mad. Jasper, furious. She practically screamed at Emmett when he wouldn't stop talking about it the whole way home. I knew it was a bad idea to give her a ride to school today, she grumbled. Rose was right, he hadn't the slightest idea why he was defending her. Despite being divorced for years, after 40 years of instinctively doing it, it was still occasionally a hard habit to break out of. Besides, her words made even more sense when added to the other thing that had happened today. I didn't take today off so I could hunt, he admitted. Why did you? Alice told me this morning there would be some sort of accident today, and she'd seen me getting dangerously close to slipping. Though he had doubted the sincerity in her words and had faith in the control he had built over the years. Thanks to Rose and Emmett's unwavering support, he didn't want to risk the small chance that it was true and agreed to stay home. You haven't had a slip in almost 15 years, Jax, Rose pointed out. Something doesn't feel right about this. She inhaled deeply, and he sensed her guilt. There's something I never told you. What? The night after Carlisle announced his intentions to move here, I heard Alice discussing it with him and Esme. She was trying to talk him out of it. And he didn't listen? Carlisle always listened to Alice. It was difficult, but I managed to convince him. I overheard her talking to Edward about how lame Forks sounded, and that there were no malls in the near vicinity. He nodded. Sadly, it did sound like something Alice would say and had said in the past, but I think it was already making the commitment at the hospital that really convinced him. If anything, Carlisle was a man of his word. Most of the time. Why didn't you tell me this before? Because I didn't understand at the time. Understand what? I've been asking myself for 2 years why she was so desperate not to move here. Rose met his gaze firmly, and now I'm convinced it has everything to do with that girl. I'm fine, Charlie, Bella insisted for the 4th time since they got home. Charlie, who had managed to find out that Bella, who was involved, had been one of the responders to the scene. Despite her protests, he had insisted on escorting her home, claiming he would have a friend pick up the truck later, if it was drivable. But your shoulder... Apparently she had hit the ground harder than she thought when she jumped out of the way. It's just a bruise, I promise. I'd broken my wrist before. First and last time she ever went rollerblading. So I'm pretty sure I remember the agony of a broken bone. I can take you to the doctor, just to be... No doctors, Bella stated firmly. She hated hospitals, even after years of just seeing Nan. Whenever she had entered a hospital in the past, there was always this niggling part of her that worried her gift would suddenly strengthen and she'd see ghosts wandering the halls. It hadn't happened yet, and Nan assured her it never would, but she was never too keen to test the theory. He didn't look entirely convinced, but thankfully backed down. I think I have an ice pack in the freezer. Do you want to put that on it? She started up the stairs. Maybe later. I think I'll take a bath now. The heat will probably do it some good. He stopped her halfway up. Hey, kiddo. How did you jump out of the way anyways? She froze. Great reflexes. Right. She wasn't surprised by his skepticism. Despite growing out of her clumsy phase years ago, she occasionally had her moments. Only this morning she had tripped over the rug in the entryway and had taken a table and a ceramic key dish down with her. Both were completely written off. Bella, he called when she was halfway up the stairs. She paused but didn't turn, standing there for several seconds before he finally spoke. I'm glad you're okay. His words were spoken gruffly, but the sincerity was clear. Bella smiled softly. Thanks, Dad. Steam filled the small bathroom as Bella unbuttoned her overshirt and shrugged it off. wincing slightly as it drug across her bruised skin. Crossing over to the mirror, she wiped away the steam that had gathered and pulled the thick tank strap to the side. Eyeing her reflection, she lightly brushed her fingertips against the darkened flesh that was roughly the size of her palm. Looking up, she caught the concerned look on Nan's face. It must have been important. The bathroom, thanks to an unfortunate event involving Nan popping in right when Bella was getting out of the shower. Bruised coccyx anyone had led to it being declared a Nan-free zone. Knowing that Charlie was downstairs, she kept her voice lowered to a whisper. "What is it?" "You're not the only one who noticed that demented fairy's face, Chime." "That's not very nice," Bella laughed, which quickly turned into a moan when the movement jostled her shoulder. Nan frowned. "You're not lying to Stash about your injuries, are you?" "Would I do that?" At Nan's stern glare, she sighed. "I'm not, see?" She rotated her with only the slightest wince. She frowned when Nan began to pace back and forth in the small room. "A part of me worried they would eventually attack you, but I never expected this." "This? What exactly is this?" "She wasn't driving the van, Nan. It rained today. It was cold. Add that together, you get ice. End of story." And does that explain why she was looking at you like that?" Bella shifted guiltily. Yeah, she had a feeling she was mad that it missed her, but she'd never say that out loud. "No," she said instead. "There's something about that girl, Bella, and it's bad." She must be really worried this was the first time she called her by her actual name in years. "I want you to promise me that you'll watch yourself around her." Bella crossed to the tub and swirled her hand through the warm water. "Not really a problem, Namyan. Other than history class, have you seen me go near any of them?" "That might not always be the case." In the midst of turning the tap off, Bella paused and turned to Nan with a furrowed brow. "What's that supposed to mean?" A troubled look on her face, Nan focused on a point over her shoulder. "I don't know." The room fell silent when Bella cut the water off completely. When she looked back up, she could see Nan was still waiting for an answer to the promise she had asked her to make. "All right, Nan, I promise." Nan nodded solemnly. "I'll let you take your bath," she said, disappearing through the closed door. Bella stiffly began removing the rest of her clothes, mulling over one of Nan's last sentences. "I don't know." For the first time ever, Bella doubted the truth in her words. Did she really not know, or was this another of those deliberately vague moments again? She decided she trusted her enough to know that if it was really bad, she would tell her. But did sorta bad fall into that category, she wondered as she slipped into the hot water and closed her eyes. I may have dodged a van today, but I might not be so lucky next time. It was a good thing that she didn't mind Nan's company, because she had a feeling bodyguard duties had just been doubled. She chuckled wryly. Renee had told her once that she hadn't just divorced Charlie, but this town and its boring monotony as well. If she had only experienced half of what Bella had since she got here, she'd be begging for boring. 10 minutes in the store, and Bella had already decided the hour drive was worth it. For a bibliophile such as herself, it had been torture to rely on the paltry offering the Forks High Library had to offer. Seriously, was it really necessary to have 5 copies each of that ridiculous Starlight series? Whiny, insecure girl falls in love with controlling D-bag vampire. What's so entertaining about that? And the small public library on Main Street had been even worse. Sure, it would have been considered heaven to anyone who considered Harlequins and nature guides to be the best the written word had to offer. But to Bella, who had almost gagged as she held Lusty Pirate Wenches, no, that wasn't the exact name of the book. But it might as well have been in her hands. She was certain she was staring into the gates of hell. After only her 3rd day here, despite all the excitement of those first few days, she had managed to fit going to the library into her schedule. It was right ahead of panic about vampires at my school. She had perused the phone book, hoping for a listing to a bookstore, or better yet, used bookstore, and had come up empty. She had lasted almost 2 weeks, which had been hell for someone who used to visit the library every other day in her old city, before she finally brought the subject up to Charlie at the dinner table during something she had affectionately dubbed awkward family share time. 2 days before the van incident, he had claimed there was one in Port Angeles, a place he conveniently had to drive up to on Saturday afternoon. He had offered her a chance to tag along, and eager to check it out and not knowing the area well enough to make the trip on her own, she had agreed. What happened Thursday had almost thrown a wrench into her plans. For a minute or two, he had been stubbornly reluctant, wanting to give her time to recover from the accident. He had already made her take Friday off, even though she kept insisting she was fine. But as promised, that Saturday, Charlie had dropped her off in front of the bookstore, telling her that he'd be about an hour and a half and to call him if there were any problems. Nodding her agreement and assuring him that she had her cell phone with her, and it was fully charged, Charlie had finally been satisfied enough to let her out of the car. Offering a little wave as he pulled away from the curb, she had turned to the storefront and glanced up at the sign. Book is the word. Her eye began twitching when Nain started humming in the background. Hey, don't even, Bella warned. Nan chuckled. Do you remember when you played that song 30 times in a row to get the teens next door to break up their loud party? I heard that song in my nightmares for weeks afterwards. Worked, didn't it? They never threw another party at their house again. I'm fairly sure they were too embarrassed to. Yeah, and you traumatized your 9-year-old granddaughter in the process. To win the war, sacrifices had to be made. Nana replied solemnly, Yeah? Does that also apply to your mailbox, which was suspiciously destroyed later that week? Nan shrugged. I needed a new one anyways. And when their parents blacklisted you from their yearly garden party, never liked them. And the worth, Nan stated firmly. Any lingering irritation over the incident, though it was minuscule to begin with, it was almost impossible to get mad at Nan, even harder to stay that way, disappeared as she swung open the door and the musty scent of books tickled her nose. Heaven, Bella sighed with a blissful smile. The woman behind the counter shot her a knowing look and nodded in agreement before rattling off a friendly, "Let me know if you need help with anything," and returning her gaze back to the book in her hand. Feeling the same giddy anticipation that she always did in a used bookstore, even more so with this one. From her position, it looked like it stretched back forever, and according to the signs, there was an upstairs too. Bella perused the conveniently placed map to the left of the entrance, and with a wide smile, immediately headed towards the section deemed classics. Nan snorted as Bella pulled a book from the shelf. Really, Chime, Dracula? What? Now that I'm in school with a bunch of vampires, it probably makes sense to brush up on my vamp mythology. Hasn't it already been established that these don't appear to be your normal vampires? Normal vampires? Isn't that an oxymoron? I'm just saying, I wouldn't exactly call that a how-to guide. Bella made an over-exaggerated effort of scanning the shelves. Hey, maybe they have a Vampires for Dummies around here somewhere. Now you're just being silly. Bella turned and stuck out her tongue, eyes widening at the husky chuckle from the other end of the aisle. Damn you, Nan, she cursed. Other than that shimmery glow to her skin, Nan appeared completely solid to her, and forgetting this had bit her in the ass more than a few times. All she had to do was remember the look on the face of her old high school librarian, the day when, in the middle of a heated argument with Nan, silent on her end of course, Bella had given into the childish urge to flip her off. Nan had laughed herself stupid at it, but the other woman hadn't found it quite as funny. With a look akin to one who had just sucked on a lemon, she sternly asked Bella not to come back after that. It's Mrs. Perkins all over again, Bella groaned. Chuckling, Nan took pity on her and moved away. She wishes she'd stayed. Behind her, lips quirked adorably, was the guy she had spent the better part of almost 2 weeks thinking and obsessing about, Jasper Hale. She'll admit it. For a second, she panicked. Backed into a cramped, semi-dark corner with a vampire blocking her only exit. This time, there was no comforting throng of students and teachers. Other than the woman at the front, a graying soccer mom type who didn't look like she could swat a fly, let alone defend herself against a vampire, she was completely alone. Nan near and lightly touching her shoulder eased her somewhat. She could feel the slight trembling static beneath her fingertips, indicating she was one wrong move from breaking out the poltergeist. Bella knew Nan wasn't powerful enough to do any significant sort of damage. She could really only move things, not tear a room completely apart. And other than Bella, she was unable to physically touch someone. She knew this for a fact thanks to an unsuccessful attempt at trying it with Renee. Not for any particular purpose, more to just see if she could. But she was hoping the element of surprise, the holy hell objects are moving on their own kind, would at least give her a moment to slip around him. Instead of attacking her, something she doubted he'd do in a public place anyways, he looked strangely hurt. She could even feel Nan easing up the pressure on her shoulder and was compelled to say something.
Hiya?
Hiya? Palm meat face. Collier, yourself, he smirked good-naturedly. Looking up at the shelf in front of her, Bella asked, Am I in your way? Were you looking for something in this aisle? Jasper shook his head. Nah, just thought I heard someone over here. Had to see who else besides me came to a bookstore on a Saturday night. Any real reader who's seen what Forks has to offer, Bella replied sarcastically. Bodice rippers and teen romances not quite up to par? Bella shuddered. God no, I'd sooner poke my eyes out than read one of those. What do you read, then? He asked, eyeing the book in her hand. Bella was embarrassed to realize she was still holding the copy of Dracula. Fan of the classics, she explained, holding it up like she was presenting evidence at a trial. I read it once when I was younger, and wanted to see if it got any better. I found it to be kinda dry, to be honest. But hey, I was a kid. Apparently a weird one. I mean, what kind of kid reads a gothic horror novel? I should have been reading Harry Potter or something. Okay, so I did read those, but only to see if it lived up to the hype. And it did. I guess. Wasn't really my thing. Have you read it? Dracula? I mean, was she babbling? You're babbling, Name confirmed. Jasper didn't call her out on it by teasing her, looking decidedly uneasy instead. No, can't say I have. He held up his own books. I'm more of a history buff. I know, I think Mr. Hill still hates you for correcting him in class the other day. I didn't know it was possible for someone to glare that hard without their eyeballs popping out. Jasper grinned. Hasn't been the first time? No, it hasn't. She's pretty sure that he's corrected him at least once a day since they started the Civil War unit, though he looked like he was a teen. Yes, an almost impossibly attractive teen, but a teen nonetheless. Something told her Jasper had been a lot closer to the action than any historian had been. She tilted her head thoughtfully. I wonder how old he actually is. Though he held himself a little straighter than most of the teens today, there was really nothing about his dress or mannerisms that gave any clue to what year he was actually born. As she studied him, though, she realized he looked a little older than what could be classified as high school age. It wasn't obvious, though. You'd probably have to be really staring to notice. She groaned silently. Which is exactly what I'm doing. Her eyes quickly dropped to the floor and an uncomfortable silence stretched out between them, before Jasper finally broke it by looking over his shoulder. I should probably go. I promised my sister I'd pick her up a few things before the stores close. She'd kill me if I forgot. Too busy contemplating on the best place to find a deep, dark hole to curl up in and die from embarrassment and not quite sure if she wanted him to stay anyways. Bella nodded. I'll see you at school, Bella. He flashed her one last heart-melting grin and left. 5 minutes later, she heard a cash register ringing off, and the pleasant jingle of the door opening. He knew her name. Why did that make her so giddy? 10 minutes had passed since he'd left, and she was still in the same aisle, replaying the meeting in her head. I'm confused, Nan, she finally admitted. About what? I know he wasn't close to me, but he didn't feel wrong. Do you think that maybe it doesn't work on them? Or maybe they have some sort of supernatural ability to dazzle you into a false sense of security? Nan was clearly amused when she answered. Did he dazzle you, Chaim? She blushed. Shut up. Nan tapped her chin thoughtfully. I don't think that's it. The other one, what was his name? You mean glary guy from Bio, Edward, I think? You felt that something wasn't right about him, remember? Yes, but... Miss... A new voice interrupted. Bella looked up to see the woman who had been behind the counter. I just thought I'd let you know that we're closing in about 5 minutes, so if you'd like me to ring those up for you... She gestured to the small pile of books beside Bella. Yeah, sure, I have everything I wanted. She slid the copy of Dracula back into its place on the shelf and gathered the books she wanted to buy in her arms, shaking her head in the negative when the woman made a "you need help" motion. 2 minutes later, Bella heard the click of the lock at her back as she stood on the sidewalk with her bag of new-to-her books. Returning the woman's friendly wave through the glass, Bella dug out her phone. Is it really that late already? She thought, looking at the screen. Why hasn't Charlie called me yet? According to the time, it had been almost 2 hours since he dropped her off. Scrolling through her contacts, she clicked his name and held the ringing phone up to her ear. Instead of a hello, Charlie answered with a curse. Damn, Bella, I forgot to call you. I'm gonna be here for another half hour at least. Remembering the diner they had passed a few blocks over, she said, I'll just grab something at the diner and meet you there. Dinah's? If that's the name of it. The one that looks like a 50s diner? Yeah, that one. Alright, I'll meet you there at 8:30. Sounds good. See you then. Be careful, he added before hanging up. Not a problem, she mumbled as she pressed the end call button. It never was when Nan was near. Her stomach grumbled as she walked, visions of cheeseburgers and fries dancing through her head. She looked up as she passed a large vacant lot sandwiched between two storefronts, seeing the glowing lights of the diner in the distance directly across from it. The gravel crunched beneath her feet as she turned and left the sidewalk. "What are you doing?" "The diner's right there," she said, nodding her head towards it. "This will cut probably 10 minutes off my walk." "I remember saying something similar, Chime," Nan replied gravely. Bella stopped. "It's not the same, Nan. Look around. It's wide open and completely lit up. Cars are passing by every second." A car whizzed by moments later, proving her point. She hesitated slightly. "Are you getting the sense that something bad will happen?" Nan shook her head. "No," she admitted reluctantly. "Then I'll be fine." As she neared closer to the other end of the lot, she was about to turn to Nan and say, "See," when three men in their late 20s stumbled around the corner. Their conversation was the boisterous, loud kind that signified drunk, and Bella recalled that not only had they passed a diner on the way to the bookstore, but a bar as well. Rusty reds, if she wasn't mistaken. Keeping her head down, she kept her fingers crossed that they'd pass her by. After all, Nan said nothing would happen. Didn't she? Well, what do we have here, boys? The largest and obvious ringleader of the three slurred. Doing her best to ignore him, Bella tightened her fingers around her bag and continued walking. Her heart clenched when she only managed to get a few more steps before she heard gravel being disturbed, and her progress was halted, when the same man who had spoken earlier was suddenly in front of her. Rancid breath blew in her face. "Where do you think you're going, sweet thing?" "I'm going to the diner," she mumbled, attempting to skirt around him. "I got something you can eat right here, honey," he replied with a leer, roughly grabbing at the arm that held her bag. She groaned as the movement jerked her bruised shoulder and caused her to drop her purchases in the process. His two approaching friends crowded around her, one kicking the bag aside and scattering her books on the ground. Though she knew it was probably a bad idea, with the hand that wasn't in the man's grasp, she subtlety reached into her pocket and wrapped her fingers around her cell phone. Unfortunately, she had put too much faith in the insulation of her jacket, cringing when she could clearly hear the muffled noise it made every time she pressed a button. "I think Girlie's got a phone, Teddy," henchman number 2 directed towards the man holding her arm, as he jerked the hand that was curled around the phone out of her pocket. He pried it from her fingers and tossed it over his shoulder. The man called Teddy roughly swung her around, and the three closed in, making her back up. She was plastered up against a wall. She pressed into it as hard as she could, wishing she could just fade into the brickwork. Tears prickled her eyes. She could see the diner just across the road, close enough that someone would surely hear her scream, but she was afraid of what they would do if she tried. She squeezed her eyes closed, trying to ignore the suggestions for what they were going to do to her, and the smell of one of the men's beer-stale breath wisping across her face as he leaned closer to her and ran a finger up and down the front of her jacket. "I'm sorry for not listening to you, Nan," she whimpered. "Cover your head, sweetheart," Nachi entreated. "There's chunks of brick here. I'm going to throw it at them, and you can be damned sure I'm aiming for their heads." You could hurt them bad. She had no idea why she was even defending them. Obviously, the fear was messing with her head. "No worse than they'll do to you, Chame, now." Whatever she was going to say was interrupted by a beeping horn and squealing tires. Bella's eyes flew open, landing on the dark blue truck that was stopped inches from where the men were gathered around her. One of the men got out before all three dropped to the ground, one yelling hoarsely, one moaning, and one unconscious. Now it was Bella's turn. "What the?" The passenger side door popped open and a familiar voice hollered, "Get in!" Bella didn't hesitate. Leaping over the squirming man on the ground, kicking at his hands when he grabbed for her, she slid into the seat and slammed the door behind her. Turning wide-eyed to the handsome blonde teen behind the wheel, Bella blurted out the first thing that popped into her head. "Right place at the right time, huh?" Turning wide-eyed to the handsome blonde teen behind the wheel, Bella asked the first thing that popped into her head. Right place at the right time. The truck peeled out of the lot, heading in the direction of Forks. "Something like that," Jasper replied grimly, before turning concerned honey eyes towards her. "Are you all right, Bella?" I'm fine," she croaked, blinking rapidly in an effort to keep the tears at bay. It didn't work. She felt the truck slow and heard the crunch of gravel as it was maneuvered off the road. Hesitant hands curled around her back and pulled her towards him. She was immediately engulfed in the comforting scent of dark chocolate and cinnamon. Just like the hot chocolate Nat would make during Christmas, she thought absently. It's all right, darling, he hushed softly. You're all right. Thank you, she sobbed, burying her head in his cool neck and jerking involuntarily at the peculiar jolt that ran through her body. She had a feeling he felt it and mistook it for a negative reaction, probably to the temperature difference which she barely noticed, because he tensed slightly before pulling back entirely. Feeling the desire to put him at ease, but unsure of what to say to explain her reaction. Not when she didn't understand it herself, she settled on lamely offering, "My shoulder." The tenseness left his frame as he nodded in understanding. "I'm sorry, I heard about that. Are you all right?" he asked for a second time. Frustration and shame battled heavily within her as she brushed away the tears that were slowly beginning to taper. "Yep, I really do have the worst luck. First that van, now this. I was told not to go through that vacant lot. But did I listen? Of course not," she laughed bitterly. "Told? By who?" Realizing she just said that out loud, Bella quickly backtracked. "By myself. I told myself that it was a bad idea." He nodded again, but Bella could see the skepticism in the movement, so she did what she usually did when caught referring to Nain. She diverted. "Not only was I attacked, but I lost my damn books as well, and my—" She trailed off. "My phone! Charlie, do you have a phone?" she begged. He nodded again, reaching over into the dash and withdrawing one. When he handed it to her, she didn't even react to the slight shock when their fingers briefly touched, flashing him a grateful smile instead. "Charlie!" Bella exclaimed into the phone as soon as his gruff hello was finished. "Bella, I've tried calling you twice. Why the hell aren't you answering your phone?" "It died on me," she lied calmly. "I thought you said it was fully charged." "I really thought it was. I guess I was wrong." "Well, where are you? I'm on my way to the diner right now." "That's the thing. I met a friend from school, and he offered me a ride home." She winced when she realized what she just said. "He? Who exactly is he?" Bella could practically hear his jaw ticking over the phone. "Just a friend." "Bella." It's just one of the Cullens kids, Charlie. It was like they were a rock band or something, though she knew for sure that 3 of them had different last names. Whenever she overheard people whispering about them in the halls or in class, even in town once or twice, all of them were referred to as simply the Cullens. She had to hold the phone away from her ear when her father bellowed, "It better not be that creepy Edward kid." Interesting. She wondered how Charlie knew him. Jasper snickered in the background. "It's not, I promise. We're already on our way back, so I'll see you when you get home." Charlie sighed resignedly. "Fine. Do you have your key?" It was the only other thing besides her wallet that those assholes hadn't managed to take from her. "Yes, Charlie." "Hey, are you feeling all right, kiddo?" "Not going to cry, not going to cry." "I'm fine, Charlie. Bye." She disconnected the call and handed it back to Jasper. She took a few deep breaths, attempting to center herself. Sorry you heard that comment about your brother." "Don't be, it's true." He grinned, and despite the all-around horribleness of her night, Bella found herself grinning back. Jasper shifted into gear and pulled back out onto the road. The cab was silent for a few long moments, and Bella found herself scanning the small space, even going so far to peek over her shoulder at the truck bed. "You looking for something?" His voice was amused. "Bags?" "Bags?" he repeated slowly. "Why?" "You said you had to pick up a few things for your sister." "Where are they?" "So that's what people meant by a deer in headlights look." "Oh," he sighed. "Okay, you caught me." He removed one hand from the wheel and rubbed at his neck. Lied. Bella was hurt. First she was attacked, and now a guy she was just admitting to herself she had a slight, major crush on, was telling her he was so desperate to get out of a conversation with her that he made something up. Could this night get any better? "Not that, darling," he hastily supplied. Guess she hadn't hid the hurt as well as she thought she did. "I was just nervous." Bella's lips quirked. "Nervous?" He nodded. "Felt like I was going to make a fool of myself any minute. I guess I can give you that." It did feel like one of us was 2 steps away from asking about the weather. Jasper laughed. "Or how about them Yankees?" "Well, you would have been out of luck there. I don't exactly follow sports." "That's okay, neither do I." Bella raised an eyebrow. "Really? Isn't that against the guy code?" Jasper shrugged. "I'm not a regular guy." Bella blinked. Understatement of the year. How the hell do you react to that without giving yourself away? If she hadn't noticed the very subtle wince after he said it, she'd be certain he was playing with her. She decided to go with Kai. "Something tells me you really aren't." The conversation was easy between them the rest of the way home. Relaxed. Bella could feel the weight of the night's events rolling off her shoulders with each smile he incited. She had to tell herself several times that it was foolish to start falling in love with a practical stranger, a vampire stranger. She didn't think she listened very well, though. As the truck idled in her driveway, she paused, fingers curled in the handle, and turned to him with a shy smile. "Thank you, really. I'm not sure how you were there exactly." She inhaled deeply and popped open the door. "But I really don't care. Just, thank you." As she slid out of the truck and gently closed the door behind her, she wondered if he had heard the double meaning in her words. The ones that said, "You're a vampire and I don't care." Closing the door, Bella leaned her head up against the cool wood, listening as the truck rumbled out of the driveway. She kept silent and still until the sound of it completely faded, before addressing the person behind her. "Why didn't you come with me?" "You were in good hands." "I was in vampire hands," she countered. Turning to Nan with a tired smile, "Could you honestly say you were afraid of him?" "No. I was more scared of them." "I'm so sorry, Chime. Why do you think you didn't get a sense of things this time?" Her tone wasn't accusing, just curious. "I can't say for certain, but I think that boy had something to do with it." "Him? How?" A knowing spark was in Nan's eyes when she answered, "I think, this time, it needed to be his turn to save you." Bella didn't know what to make of that. Pulling out of the driveway, Jasper hit speed dial and held the phone up to his ear. "Hey, Jax! Are you alone?" "Me, Emmett, and Esme are here." Carlisle picked up a late shift, and Edward and Alice ran upstate to hunt. "Why?" "I want you and Aim to meet me at our spot. I'll tell you why when I get there." Jasper disconnected and tossed the phone in the seat beside him. By using his gift on the three that had attacked her tonight, he had risked exposure, but he couldn't really find it in himself to care. Even less now that he knew for certain what she was, his mate. He had suspected it for days, but having never experienced the mating bond before, not when it only happened once in a lifetime, he had been hesitant to label it as such. He had a feeling Rose knew at first. It would certainly explain all the sly looks she kept shooting him during history class, when he'd pay more attention to the back of Bella's head than he would to the teacher. But now, after hugging her, touching her, literally feeling it, snapping it into place, he knew without a doubt, it filled him with both elation and fury. Not just over what she had suffered tonight, but the lengths Alice seemed to be going just to keep them apart. The van that day hadn't been the only time. No, she had tried to keep him from going to Port Angeles tonight, too. Jasper had been immediately suspicious, deciding to go see that new war drama that he genuinely had been interested in seeing. That was playing in the small, dingy Forks movie theater instead. He had learned a long time ago how to work around Alice's visions, and it would usually placate her enough to back off. He had even went one step further to back up his decision and distract her from looking further into his future by launching into a lengthy description of the movie, and when her eyes had glazed over, not in a vision, but with boredom, he had casually asked her to come with him. She was all too eager to let him go out alone after that, suddenly remembering plans she had made with Edward. He had to give it to her. She was almost as convincing at lying as he was. He was aware that it was impossible to trick her forever. But by the time he swung off of Main Street onto the road that took him to Port Angeles, it was already too late for her to do anything about it anyways. Once he drove into the area deemed downtown, he had pulled into an empty parking lot across the street from the bookstore he had originally intended to visit, and sat there for the better part of an hour. He may have defied Alice, but he honestly had no idea why she had attempted to keep him from coming here in the first place. She hadn't exactly been forthcoming with information, simply bursting into the home library as he'd stared up at the walls of books he had read a dozen times over, contemplating on going to his favorite bookstore to get new ones, yelling, "Don't," at the top of her lungs. She had changed it to a more demure, "I don't think it's such a good idea, Jazz," at the look that he couldn't stop from twisting his face at her outburst. It never failed to frustrate him that, even after 50-plus years, he seemed to be the only gifted one in the family that at least tried not to use said gift on other people, especially those that explicitly asked them not to. Either Alice and Edward just weren't getting the message, or they simply didn't care. He had a feeling the second one was a lot closer to the truth. Though Alice believed she was just as capable of manipulating his own gift as he, on occasion, did hers. He likened her attempts to the way a human believed they could trick a lie detector by stepping on a tack placed in their shoe. She didn't seem to realize that changing your mind was easy. Controlling your emotions, though, not so much. So while she tried her best to focus on the honest panic and worry that she felt, he could still sense the underlying deceit she was trying to hide. Sadly, it had been something he used to ignore in the past, simply resigning himself to the future that Alice had deemed fit for him, but he wouldn't ignore it this time, not when her emotions were so similar to the ones earlier that week, to the day that she had almost gotten hurt. Sitting in the parking lot, Jasper wondered briefly if he had made the wrong decision, if Alice had used Port Angeles as misdirection and that something was going to go down in Forks instead. He reluctantly brushed the thought aside, still finding it hard to believe that Alice was capable of being that malicious. Looking up, he scanned the storefront with a critical eye, trying to determine if anything seemed out of place. Seeing nothing, but firmly convinced that the store had something to do with her visions, he slid from the truck, locked the doors, and casually made his way across the street. When he caught a familiar scent entering the store 10 minutes later, he knew, maybe not the why or the what, but definitely the who. Bella Swan. Suddenly nervous, he had gathered up every ounce of courage he possessed and followed the amazing scent to its owner. The first few seconds of standing behind her had been strange. Most of the time, people's emotions were like snowflakes to him, though the emotions were the same, the way each person felt them was different. Snowflakes that started to multiply until they basically became raging snowstorms. It was only those who thought they were alone that offered him some semblance of a respite from his gift, because not only were the emotions easier to single out and identify, but they would steady out and become almost muted like a computer on sleep mode. It was usually only around other people that they roared back to life. Bella was alone, not doing anything in particular that would shift her emotions. She wasn't even looking at the shelves or the book she held in her hand, but they flickered in ways similar to someone having a conversation with someone other than themselves. Those ones were usually accompanied by either anger or self-loathing. When she finally turned, he had been amused when she stuck out her tongue and slightly confused as well, because even though she was looking in his direction, it seemed like she wasn't actually looking at him. His confusion melted away as a smirk corked his lips at her adorableness, and he proceeded to have the best and quite possibly the most embarrassingly awkward 5 minutes of his life. He blamed the conversation about that damn Dracula book for throwing him off. He had sat out in his truck afterwards, seriously considering bashing his head against the steering wheel a few times, asking himself why he lied to her about picking things up for Rosie, who had come in at the tail end of the Port Angeles conversation with Alice and was unaware that he still intended to come here despite what he had told Alice. He had been tempted to stick around for a few minutes afterwards to watch for Bella, but felt it was a little too borderline stalkerish. As he drove away, he pondered again why Alice had been so adamant to keep him away tonight. Would she really go through all this trouble to stop something as simple as a single conversation? Jasper hit the brakes and thanked his lucky stars that no one was behind him. No, she wouldn't. Something inside told him he would regret it if he ignored the instincts that had been finely tuned in the wars. The ones that were currently telling him to go back. He listened, or should have known better than trying to ignore them in the first place, Jasper thought as he turned onto the road that led to the house. He didn't want to even consider what would have happened to Bella if he hadn't turned around. Halfway up the drive, he pulled his truck off into a little alcove. He didn't want to take the chance that Alice or Edward had come home and would hear him coming. Sliding out of the cab, he slammed the door behind him and took off through the woods. Jumping over a small stream, he headed towards the small, practically hidden, thanks to the trees that enclosed it, meadow located almost on the other side of Forks. It was his, Rose, and Emmett's spot, and they would escape there when things got tense at the house, usually because of Alice or Edward's meddling. There was even a little ramshackle cabin that had been abandoned years ago, tucked up against a cliff edge a few meters away from it, that he had gotten Emmett to fix up enough to be considered relatively passable. Not necessarily somewhere you could live, it was only one room and a little too small for that, but definitely somewhere you could hole yourself up for a day or two. He had asked Emmett specifically to do it because Alice didn't monitor his business as much, and Edward hated listening to his thoughts. They had realized a long time ago that if they wanted certain tasks to remain secret, it usually helped if they got Emmett to do whatever it was instead. Rose stood from her position perched on a large rock when Jasper broke through the brush. Emmett was leaned casually against a tree. "What's the word, Jay?" he asked before pausing to sniff the air. "Why, you sly dog? I recognize that scent. Why didn't you tell us you had a date?" Jasper wasn't in the mood to joke tonight. I didn't. Bella was attacked an hour ago. Attacked? Rosie's voice wobbled as her face crumbled. Emmett pushed off the tree to go to her side and wrap a comforting arm around her waist. She's fine, Jasper assured her. Shaken up? Yeah, but I got there before they could do anything to her. They weren't... Emmett pointed at himself. Jasper shook his head. No, they were human. Where was this? Anyways, Port Angeles. Rosie's emotions immediately shifted to fury. You mean the same place Alice warned you not to go tonight? You're not betting against Alice again, are you, Jay? Emmett tutted. Shut up, Rose snapped before turning blazing eyes back to Jasper. Damn it, Jasper. This is too many coincidences. You and I both know she plays it fast and loose with her visions, but what the hell is she hoping to achieve this time? You already know why she's doing this, Rose? The anger drained out of her to be replaced with sympathy. She's trying to keep you away from your mate, she replied softly. Emmett's eyes widened. No shit, that girl is your mate. Jasper nodded. Congratulations, he offered eagerly. The grin slipped off of his face. Oh, damn. That's why Alice has been acting so sketchy lately and clingier than usual, isn't it? That's putting it mildly, Jasper muttered. Emmett shifted uncomfortably. I get what you guys are saying, but you can't be sure she's doing this because of interior motives. Ulterior and... Rose corrected with a quirk of her lips. Whatever. All I'm saying is this could be just her jealous. Emmett was always so willing to see the good in everyone, giving them all the benefit of the doubt. Jasper liked this about him. Most days, but now it was only serving to frustrate him. Rosie too, apparently. Also, she let a girl almost die and then followed that up with a potential rape because she was jealous. Emmett was uneasy now. That's not what I'm saying. Besides, you saw the angle that Vane hit her truck. It was only enough to dent it slightly. It wouldn't have necessarily killed her. Jasper was growling now. So simply injuring my mate would have been better. What? No, he turned to Rose pleadingly. Damn it, babe. You promised last time you'd shut me up before I put my foot in my mouth. Well, excuse me, but I'm a little distracted by the desire to kick your ass right now. Emmett huffed. Fine. What I'm trying to say is, we don't know what. Seeing Rose's pointed glare, he corrected himself. Okay, so maybe we do know what she's doing. But why is she being so extreme about it? You guys have been divorced for 6 years, Jay, and it's been even longer since you've really been together. At least a decade or two. He became defensive at Jasper's surprised look. Hey, I noticed things. He shifted his gaze between Rose and Jasper. I mean, sure, she's a little selfish sometimes, but she's never actually hurt anyone before. We don't have all the facts. He finished with a mumble. Jasper's shoulders slumped. Emmett actually had a point. Was this nothing more than panic jealousy? With so many potential outcomes, he had no idea if Alice actually saw Bella getting badly hurt from anything that had happened so far. This could be nothing more than a stubborn attempt to slow down what she probably knew was inevitable anyways. He'd seen Alice when she hadn't gotten her way in the past. She would never scream, lash out at someone, or destroy anything. Instead, she'd pout, whine, cajole. So why would she go from that to, well, murder? Frustrated, he ran a hand through his hair. So where does this leave us? I'm not a psychic, but I don't see confronting her and expecting her to tell us the truth working out too well. Carlisle, Emmett suggested mildly. You already know how that would go as well. What Emmett had cheekily said earlier about not betting on Alice was considered the gospel truth in Carlisle's eyes. Not only had her visions gotten him out of a few sticky situations in the past, but it also made him, and admittedly the rest of them, millionaires many times over. And now, she could do no wrong. There was always a reasonable explanation for every choice she made, with no question as why they always seemed to be in her favor. That's why Jasper found it so hard to believe that he had still moved to Forks. He had to give Rose credit. She must have been damn convincing that night. Hey, maybe we could get Edward to listen, and Emmett frowned. Okay, even I realize how terrible that idea is. Edward and Alice were bosom buddies. There was no way he'd even consider narsing on her. Friends, Rose suggested. How's a lame TV show supposed to help us? Rose and Jasper turned to Emmett with an incredulous stare. No. Rose spoke slowly. I'm saying we become friends with her. Emmett went from confused to shocked. Is my Rosie actually suggesting we become friends with a human? He sniffled and pantomimed, wiping away a tear. I'm so proud. Jasper had to admit he was surprised as well. Even if Rose was one of the best and secretly big-hearted people he knew, she could still be a bit of a bitch, especially to humans. She must have sensed it because she shrugged self-consciously. What? I realize it sounds strange coming from me, but it's like I feel this urge to protect her or something. I can't really explain it. Emmett nodded knowingly. I feel it too. Jasper's brows rose. Was it possible? Did this regular human girl not only have a mating bond with one vampire, but sparked a familial bond with two more? Not only were familial bonds rare, but they had only ever existed between vampires. Carlisle and Esme steadfastly believed that one existed between them and their brood, but they were only half right. While Jasper couldn't speak for Alice and Edward, he knew that while there was one between him, Rose, and Emmett, it definitely did not extend to the others. So why did they stay with them? Comfort, familiarity. Change was a difficult concept for creatures that were essentially frozen in time, and though he knew she'd never admit to it, Jasper believed Rose stayed out of some sort of obligation she felt towards Carlisle, her maker, a complicated and oftentimes messy bond in itself, and where Rose goes or doesn't go, so goes Emmett. And him. To some extent, despite how stifled he felt by the others, excluding Rose and Emmett, of course, they always knew when to give him space. At times, after 55 years, this life with the Cullens was the only one he knew, or at least the one he wasn't trying to forget. But maybe this was why he had found his mate. Why Rose and Emmett felt a bond towards her. Maybe this was going to be the thing that would finally bring about change. Something that would allow them to break free from ties that had slowly become chains over the years, to forge out on their own and not have to worry about their thoughts being monitored or their every move being watched. To not have to spend decades in school just to keep up appearances, to just be free. Monday, Jasper decided with a nod. Nothing more needed to be said. Whether she liked it or not, Bella Swan's life was about to change. Emmett bounced and began excitedly jabbering to Rose. Cocking his head, Jasper eyed the exuberant bear of a man with a smirk. I almost feel sorry for that girl. Oh, this is going to be so awesome. We're going to be total BFFs. Strike that. I definitely feel sorry for her.